Here's one ad. This is subtle. Consider your man card reissued. The fine print reads, if it's good enough for the professional, it's good enough for you. Who's the professional? One 2012 product catalog shows the silhouette of a soldier holding his helmet. It says, when you need to perform under pressure, implying that if you buy this product, you too can do what this soldier does under pressure. Here was another one. Forces of opposition, bow down. You are single-handedly outnumbered. And at this point, just in case it's not clear that we're selling military capacity here, there's this, quote, it's tested and proven reliable in the most brutal conditions on Earth. It's the uncompromising choice when you demand a rifle as mission adaptable as you are. It is, quote, the ultimate military combat weapons system. The ultimate military combat weapons system. In 2014, the families of the little first graders and the educators who were killed in the Sandy Hook shooting, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Remington, the manufacturer of the rifle that was used in that massacre. And they used the company's marketing as evidence that this was a product that was not being marketed for a lawful use. Their argument in court was that this gun maker was specifically marketing the AR-15 rifle to civilians so that those civilians could use it for military-style combat in civilian life, which is not a thing you are legally allowed to do. During the trial, the lawyer for the families explained it a different way. He said, imagine if a car company was marketing one of its vehicles as being perfect for running people over.
Can you imagine Ford Motor Company advertising one of their cars to go run over people? Who would hesitate for a second to hold Ford accountable for that?
Who would hesitate to hold Ford accountable for that? And who would question that Ford should be held accountable for that and that American law would allow it? There is a very specific reason it's been impossible to hold gun manufacturers accountable following America's epidemic of mass shootings. It's because the gun industry alone, among all American industry, the gun industry alone has special immunity. I mean, if you make a pillow that's prone to burst into flames when it is exposed to heat, or if you manufacture a flotation device that sinks, right, not only are you liable to consumer protection regulations that will likely remove your product from the marketplace or prevent you at least from advertising it. Not only that, if your product injures or kills somebody because of those failures, you'll get nailed for it, right? But it's not the case with guns. Guns alone are protected from those types of lawsuits. In 2005, Congress passed a bill that was later signed into law by President George W. Bush. It's called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. You see the Benetton array there of the diverse group supporting that. That was right before the Democrats swept the House and Senate. But the lawyers for the families of the Sandy Hook victims may, with this lawsuit they initially filed in 2014, they may have become the first people in the country to find a way around that gun makers' immunity law. And it starts with the marketing strategy used by gun makers. Today, hugely important ruling in Connecticut. The Supreme Court in Connecticut today ruled that marketing military-style guns to civilians as a way of killing enemies, that could be a violation of state fair trade laws. It was a 4-3 decision. It overturned a lower court ruling that had thrown out that lawsuit. And boy, does this open up a whole world of possibilities. I mean, this ruling paves the way for the families to subpoena internal documents on how the gun companies marketed their AR-15s, this rifle that has become the weapon of choice for mass shooters. Right, these are documents, the internal documents and communications about how they're trying to sell these things. These are documents the manufacturers have fought tooth and nail to keep out of the public eye. Because they have fought so hard to keep them out of the public eye, it is expected that these documents may provide a sort of brutal glimpse into how the industry operates and how it has strategized how to sell its products. I mean, a similar discovery process in court is what essentially pulled back the mask on the tobacco industry and what that industry knew about what it was selling to the American people and how. Discovery in the tobacco case is what forced that industry into a $250 billion settlement that became the beginning of the end for that industry. Here for me, though, is maybe the part of this that's going to be most important to watch. In their ruling today, these judges in the Connecticut Supreme Court said that it will now fall to a jury to decide whether the promotional schemes alleged in the present case rise to the level of illegal trade practices and whether fault for the tragedy can be laid at their feet, which means this will no longer be knocking around among judges. This will be a jury, a Connecticut jury that will finally get to decide this case as it specifically relates to what happened at Sandy Hook. And they will get to look at how this gun manufacturer marketed this rifle as the ultimate combat weapon system for civilians, in the context of knowing that that rifle took the lives of 20 first graders and 6 adults, right? 26 people killed at Sandy Hook. Killing all 26 of them took 264 seconds because of the capabilities of that ultimate combat weapon system for civilians. 264 seconds. Gun lobbies may have immunity thanks to Congress and thanks to President George W. Bush, and you may be allowed to market this type of weapon. But you know, you can't market a car on the basis of how good it would be for running people down in a crowd. And maybe this jury in Connecticut will find that you can't market weapons like this to civilians for combat use in civilian life. Because in civilian life, there is no such thing as legal combat use.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.